A four-time world champion spun out on lap 1. A driver who was on course for a podium got a 20-second penalty and dropped to 8th. And somehow, through all of that chaos, a 19-year-old kid from Bologna crossed the finish line first for the third time in a row. That was the 2026 Miami Grand Prix. 57 laps, 0 boring moments. The race where Formula One remembered it doesn't need a script, because reality always writes something better. I'm going to walk you through every single thing that happened at Miami this weekend. Every crash, every penalty, every controversial moment, every jaw-dropping decision. Start to finish, nothing left out. Grab a drink, settle in, because this race had more storylines in 57 laps than most seasons manage all year. Let's rewind 24 hours, because even before the race started, this weekend had already delivered something extraordinary. Kimi Antonelli, 19 years old, pole position for the third consecutive race, and something even more remarkable than that, Verstappen, for the first time all season, was on the front row, second, right next to Antonelli. And this was a big deal. Red Bull arrived in Miami with a huge upgrade package, revised side pods, reworked rear wing, a fix to a steering issue Verstappen had been complaining about since pre-season. The car that had been a complete disaster in the first 3 races suddenly looked competitive. Verstappen said it felt like a different car. The 4-time champion was back, or so it seemed. Strategically, the entire field bar one car lined up on the medium compound. One stop was the expected approach in the dry, but with a 40% chance of rain hanging over South Florida, the strategists were already sweating. One shower could turn this race upside down. Literally. 5 red lights on the gantry, 20 cars on the grid, one of the most unpredictable tracks on the calendar. Whatever was about to happen in the next 57 laps, it was going to be anything but quiet. But nobody predicted what happened in the first 2 minutes. Lights out, and immediately chaos. Leclerc, starting from 3rd on the grid, absolutely rockets off the line. We're talking a start so good that before the field even reached turn 1, Leclerc had passed both Antonelli from pole and Verstappen from 2nd. Just like that, Ferrari P1, Mercedes P2, Red Bull somewhere behind and already in trouble. Because Verstappen locked up at turn 1 trying to hang on to the lead, and then, you know that moment in a race when something goes wrong and everything slows down in your brain? Verstappen hit the exit curb at turn 2, the car snapped, the rear broke loose, and Max Verstappen, 4-time world champion, one of the finest car controllers in the history of the sport, spun around 360 degrees in front of the entire field. The pack is steaming towards him, 20 cars at racing speed, and somehow, nobody hits him. Alex Albon later said he must have gained 6 or 7 positions just by avoiding Verstappen's spinning car. It was genuinely miraculous that it didn't take out half the grid. Verstappen dropped to 10th from 2nd on the grid. And that was just turn 1. The race was about 90 seconds old. Further back, things weren't much cleaner. Hamilton and Colapinto made contact in the opening melee. Hamilton's Ferrari took damage. Colapinto's Alpine got away with it. The stewards looked at it, called it a racing incident, and moved on. But the real moment of the opening laps, the one that stopped every broadcaster in the world, was still coming. Lap 5, Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, running in the midfield after the lap 1 chaos, set his sights on Liam Lawson's Racing Bulls ahead of him heading into turn 17. He went around the outside, a standard overtaking attempt, the kind of move you see 50 times a race weekend. Except Lawson moved defensively, and as he did, he locked up and his car clipped the rear left of Gasly's Alpine. What happened next was one of the most alarming moments Formula One has seen in years. Gasly's Alpine went airborne, completed a full flip, and slammed into the barrier upside down. The cockpit protection, the halo, did exactly what it was designed to do. Gasly climbed out, walked away, gave a thumbs up to the marshals. But His race was over. Lawson's car was also too damaged to continue, 2 retirements in 1 incident. Safety car deployed. The race neutralized. And meanwhile, Isaac Hadjar, Verstappen's rookie teammate, had already hit the wall at turn 14 earlier on the same lap and retired. Red Bull lost both cars before the race was even properly underway. 5 laps, 3 retirements, 1 360-degree spin from the championship contender, 1 car flipped upside down. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Miami. The safety car gave everyone time to breathe, and more importantly, time to think, because the strategic picture at this point was fascinating. Leclerc led from Antonelli, Norris was 3rd, Piastri 4th, Russell somewhere in the mix, and Verstappen, recovering from his lap 1 spin on hard tires, was carving through the field like a man with something to prove. Here's something nobody expected. Verstappen on hard tires, the compound he'd chosen specifically to go long before pitting, was actually flying. He was making passes, putting the car where it didn't look like it should fit, looking like 2022-era Verstappen for the first time all season. At one point, he was running as high as 3rd. The Red Bull upgrade package was clearly real. The car that had been called undrivable and terrible by its own drivers in the first 3 races was suddenly scrapping with the leaders. This was the subplot nobody had on their bingo card entering Miami. Lap 21, the pit stop phase begins. Mercedes pit Russell first, the undercut play. Get him on the fresh rubber early, see if he can leapfrog someone. It works moderately well. Lap 24, Ferrari panic. Leclerc, who had been leading comfortably, gets called in early because of the Russell threat, but Ferrari's execution lets them down. A slow stop, a fumbled tire change. Leclerc exits behind Russell, the driver they were trying to cover, a self-inflicted wound that Leclerc immediately questioned over team radio. Lap 27, Antonelli pits from 2nd place. He comes out behind a dueling Verstappen and Hamilton, 2 cars fighting each other, blocking his outlap. Not ideal for a driver managing reported gearbox and throttle concerns. But Antonelli's pace on the outlap is strong enough that when Norris pits a lap later, handing the lead temporarily to Piastri, the 19-year-old emerges in the race lead. Then, the moment that decided the race. Norris, on fresh tires, starts closing the gap to Antonelli. 2 seconds, 1.5, the gap is shrinking. McLaren is telling Norris to push. Everything is set up for a last-lap battle. Except, Antonelli doesn't panic. He finds Norris on track, makes a clean, incisive pass, and then immediately passes Verstappen to break the toe to Norris. 1 move to take the lead, another to end the threat. The race described it as exactly that, incisive, not just talented, not just quick, clinical. From that point, Antonelli controls the race. Norris was told to cool down due to a wing problem. The gap grows, 3 seconds, 4, and behind them, absolute carnage is developing in the final laps. The final 2 laps of this race were more chaotic than the first 5, and that's saying something. Piastri overtakes Leclerc on the penultimate lap for P3, the McLaren moving into podium position. Clean, controlled, professional. Oscar Piastri doing what Oscar Piastri does. And then Leclerc, desperate to get the position back, driving a car that was already not quite right, goes into turn 3 on the final lap. He loses it. High-speed spin. The Ferrari slides, taps the wall with its front left corner, suspension damage, steering arm damaged. The car is limping. In a normal race, Leclerc limps home in damaged equipment and accepts his fate. But Charles Leclerc is not the kind of driver who accepts anything without a fight. He pushed the damaged Ferrari to the absolute limit, and in doing so, went off track at several corners, including pushing a lapped car out of the way to keep positions. Post-race, the stewards go to work, and they come back with a verdict that completely rewrites the results of the race. 20-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage repeatedly. A drive-through penalty converted to time because the race had already finished. 20 seconds added to Leclerc's time. He goes from 3rd to 8th, behind his own teammate Lewis Hamilton, behind Franco Colapinto in the Alpine. Hamilton, who'd been running in damaged equipment all race after the lap 1 contact with Colapinto, inherits 7th. Colapinto gets a career-best result, and Charles Leclerc sits in the Ferrari motorhome saying just 5 words. Very disappointed with myself. And he's not the only one visiting the stewards. Russell gets a look in too for separate incidents with both Leclerc and Verstappen during that frantic finale. Verstappen gets a 5-second penalty for crossing the white line at pit exit, though crucially it doesn't change his final classification of 5th. The final official results look completely different from what crossed the finish line, which is very, very Miami. So when the dust settled, and it took a while for the dust to settle, here's how the final classified results looked. P1, Kimi Antonelli, Mercedes. P2, Lando Norris, McLaren. P3, Oscar Piastri, McLaren. P4, George Russell, Mercedes. P5, Max Verstappen, Red Bull. P6, Leclerc gets bumped out of the points battle post-penalty. P7, Franco Colapinto, career best finish. P8, Charles Leclerc, a race that began with a lead and ended with a 20-second penalty and 8th place. Antonelli's championship lead stretches to 20 points, and here are the records he broke by winning this race. The first driver in Formula One history to convert his first 3 consecutive pole positions into race wins. Not Schumacher, not Senna, not Hamilton, not Verstappen. Antonelli, at 19 years old. The third driver in history to win their first 3 Formula One victories consecutively, after Damon Hill and Mika Hakkinen. And Norris, who led 15 laps of this race, who had the pace, who thought he had the win, crossed the line and immediately said over team radio, "Fuck's sake, how did we not win this?" Which is a completely valid question, and zero answer makes it feel better. McLaren had the fastest car in Miami on pure pace. Their execution at the pit stops let them down, and Antonelli was simply in the right place at exactly the right time. The other major talking point from Miami, and don't lose sight of this, is Red Bull. Verstappen finished 5th, scored points, ran at the front for multiple laps on his first stint, and after the race said the car doesn't feel like a passenger car anymore. That is a seismic shift from where Red Bull were in the first 3 races. They're not championship contenders yet, but the story of Red Bull being completely broken, that chapter might be closing. The 2026 Miami Grand Prix. 57 laps, a flipped Alpine, a spinning world champion, a 20-second post-race penalty, 3 retirements in 5 laps, a 19-year-old who refuses to lose, and Lando Norris somewhere asking the universe how he didn't win. Formula One doesn't need a script. If you want the full breakdown of every race this season, subscribe because we cover Formula One deeper than anyone else. And drop a comment. What was your moment of the race? The Gasly flip, Leclerc's final lap, or Antonelli making it 3 from 3? I'll see you in the next one.